When we talk about believing in ourselves, most people think of it as a personal challenge, like it's something we do alone, in a vacuum, maybe even in front of a mirror with a motivational quote stuck to the corner. But the truth is, belief in yourself isn't actually about you, not really. It starts with something deeper, something far more powerful. It starts with your why. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Here we go with the why talk, but stay with me. Because unless you start with a clear understanding of why you do what you do, why you want what you want, and why you're chasing what you're chasing, belief becomes nothing more than temporary hype. It's the difference between motivation that lasts 10 minutes and purpose that fuels you for 10 years. Think about the people who inspire you, not the ones who are loud or successful or always winning. I mean the ones who quietly move through life with conviction. The ones who seem steady even when things fall apart. The ones who lead with integrity, who show up again and again, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Those people aren't just confident, they're clear. They know why they're doing what they're doing. And that clarity, that deep-rooted purpose, is what anchors belief. Because when you have a reason, a cause, a mission that is bigger than yourself, believing in yourself isn't just about self-esteem anymore. It's about responsibility. You show up for something beyond your own comfort. You act not because you feel ready, but because what you're doing matters too much not to. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I met a young teacher who had left a high-paid job in tech to work in one of the most underfunded school districts in her state. When I asked her why she made the switch, she said something I'll never forget. Because I couldn't stand the idea that some kids would never be told they're brilliant. I'd rather be tired, broke, and fulfilled than rested, rich, and numb. It's belief. But not in the way we normally define it. She wasn't trying to build self-confidence just to feel good about herself. She was living her purpose. And because of that, she didn't need to be convinced she was worthy. She had work to do. She had people to serve. And that was enough. Purpose gives belief direction. Without it, belief can easily drift into ego, or worse, apathy. But when you believe because your actions serve something meaningful, your belief becomes a foundation. You stop worrying so much about whether you're good enough and start focusing on whether you're doing enough to honor what you care about. And ironically, that's what makes you trustworthy. That's what makes you courageous. That's what makes people follow you. So many people are chasing confidence as if it's a prize at the end of some journey. They say, when I feel more confident, then I'll go for it. Then I'll speak up. Then I'll take the risk. But confidence doesn't come first. What comes first is clarity. And clarity comes from reflection. You need to ask yourself, what do I believe in even when I'm scared? What do I stand for even when it's inconvenient? What do I want to leave behind, even if I never get recognized for it? Those are hard questions, but they're necessary ones. Because believing in yourself is never really about being the loudest or the best. It's about being the most aligned with your values, aligned with your priorities, aligned with something so meaningful that failure doesn't scare you nearly as much as not trying. Purpose doesn't eliminate fear, let's be honest. Fear never fully goes away, but purpose puts fear in its place. When your actions are fueled by a why that's bigger than your own success, you'll still feel afraid, but you'll move anyway. Not because you're fearless, but because you're committed. It's easy to look at someone doing cool things, starting a company, launching a movement, writing a book, building a nonprofit, and think they must have had so much confidence. But talk to them, really talk to them, and you'll hear something different. You'll hear about uncertainty, about sleepless nights, about doubt and setbacks and imposter syndrome. What got them through wasn't blind belief in themselves. It was belief in what they were trying to create. It was a refusal to let fear have the final word. Belief that starts with self is fragile. It shatters when circumstances change. But belief that starts with purpose is resilient. It grows when tested. It becomes stronger in the fire. Because it's no longer about proving something to the world. It's about doing something meaningful in the world. So if you want to believe in yourself, and I mean really believe, not fake it till you make it hype, start by going inward. Get quiet. Strip away the noise. Ask yourself what truly matters to you. Ask yourself who you want to serve. Ask yourself what you want your story to be about long after the spotlight fades. Because once you're clear on that, the rest starts to shift. Doubt doesn't disappear, but it stops dictating your choices. Fear doesn't vanish, but it no longer paralyzes you. You begin to move differently, speak differently, lead differently, not because you're certain of every outcome, but because you're certain of your intention. And that kind of belief, the kind that begins with purpose, is contagious. It draws people in, it inspires trust, it invites collaboration. Because people don't just want to follow those who are confident, they want to follow those who are grounded in something real. So don't just work on believing in yourself, work on understanding your why. Because once you know what you're standing for, standing tall becomes a natural result. We've been told for years that belief in yourself comes from confidence, that if you just feel good enough, strong enough, ready enough, then you'll be able to take on anything. But here's the hard truth. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It's a result of action. And even more importantly, it's not a feeling, it's a decision. We've confused belief with bravado. We've built this illusion that to do something meaningful, we have to first feel bold and certain. But look around at the people who have actually done the brave thing, the bold thing, the unexpected thing. You'll find that most of them didn't feel particularly brave when they started. In fact, many were terrified. But they decided. They chose to show up anyway. That's where real belief begins. There's a kind of myth we've created about ourselves that when we finally arrive at some magical level of self-assurance, only then will we have permission to try, to speak, to lead. And that myth is dangerous because it gives our doubts the steering wheel. It turns belief into something conditional, something we postpone, something we tell ourselves we'll earn later when we've done more or proved more or succeeded more. But the truth is, belief is not built through trophies or applause. It's not built through comparison or recognition. It's built in the moment you decide to show up, not because you feel confident, but because you choose to act in alignment with your values. It's a choice you make again and again, not just once. Let me tell you about someone I met during a leadership retreat a few years back. He was a soft-spoken man in his late 40s, working as a hospital janitor. But when he introduced himself, he didn't talk about cleaning floors. He said, I help people heal faster. And the room went silent. You could feel everyone's posture change. Why? Because this man had made a decision. He had reframed his role as part of a mission. He wasn't waiting for a better title or a bigger platform to believe in his own worth. He had already decided his work mattered. And in doing so, he gave all of us permission to look at our own work differently too. That kind of belief doesn't come from a self-help book or a viral quote on the internet. It comes from choosing consciously, repeatedly, to define your worth by your contribution, not your comfort. It comes from acting as if what you're doing matters even when no one's clapping, even when no one sees. You don't need to feel brave to be brave. You just need to decide that something matters more than your fear, that your values matter more than your comfort, that your integrity matters more than your insecurity. The problem is, most of us wait. We wait for permission, we wait to feel ready, we wait for the fear to go away, and in the waiting, we slowly build a life designed around avoiding discomfort instead of pursuing meaning. But discomfort is not the enemy. In fact, it's often the best indicator that we're moving towards something important. Every time you choose to move forward in the face of doubt, you grow, even if you fail, even if it hurts, because you're reinforcing something much more powerful than temporary confidence. You're reinforcing trust, not in your ability to succeed every time, but in your ability to stay true to yourself no matter the outcome. Think about the most transformative moments in your life, the ones that shaped your character, the ones that brought real change. Were you confident in those moments, or were you unsure, maybe even scared, but you showed up anyway? One of the most overlooked truths about belief is that it doesn't need to feel good to be real. Sometimes belief looks like shaky hands and nervous breath. Sometimes it looks like writing the email you're afraid to send. Sometimes it's just raising your hand and saying, I think this matters. That's not flashy. That's not glamorous, but it's real. And over time, those decisions build something stronger than confidence. They build courage. We live in a world obsessed with performance, with image, with likes and shares and curated highlight reels. And in that world, it's easy to believe that you need to be spectacular to be valuable. But the people who actually change things, the people who live lives of meaning and influence, they're not chasing the spotlight. They're focused on the substance. They make the quiet decision over and over again to show up even when no one is watching. That's where belief is forged. You are allowed to feel doubt and still move forward. You are allowed to hear the voice in your head telling you you're not ready and choose not to obey it. Because belief is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to act in spite of it. Some of the most powerful leaders I've ever met were not the ones who walked into a room with swagger and charm. They were the ones who listened deeply, who spoke honestly, who admitted what they didn't know, and who took responsibility when it mattered most. Their belief didn't come from charisma, it came from character. And that kind of belief is available to you right now. It starts with deciding that you are going to show up for something that matters, not because you feel ready, but because it's worth it. Not because you're fearless, but because you're committed. So don't wait for confidence to arrive. Don't wait for all the lights to turn green. Choose to believe before you feel certain. Choose to take the step before the path is fully clear. Choose to trust that your willingness to act, to serve, to stand up for what matters, that is what builds belief. Because in the end, belief isn't about hype. It's about alignment. It's about congruence between what you say and what you do. And that kind of belief, it doesn't just help you do cool things, it makes you the kind of person others want to follow. The greatest misconceptions about self-belief is that it's something we're supposed to manufacture entirely on our own. That it's an internal flame we're expected to keep lit, even when everything around us is dark. But that's not how it works, at least not sustainably. The truth is, believing in yourself isn't a solo act, it's deeply relational. Who you surround yourself with, who reminds you of who you are, matters more than most of us want to admit. We live in a world that glorifies independence. I don't need anyone, I'll prove them all wrong, just watch me. These are the mantras of our modern culture, but underneath them is often loneliness, exhaustion, and an unspoken fear of being truly seen. The idea that we must prove ourselves alone is not strength, it's isolation disguised as grit. And it doesn't build lasting belief, it builds armor. And armor is heavy. The people around you are either reinforcing your identity or eroding it. That's not a small thing, it's everything. Because on the days when your belief in yourself is running low, and there will be many, you will borrow belief from others. From the voices that have spoken truth into you, from the mentors who saw your potential before you did, from the friends who show up, not just when you win, but when you're unsure if you can even keep going. That borrowed belief, it keeps you moving. I once sat with a young entrepreneur who was about to shut down his startup. He was brilliant, full of ideas, had raised capital, hired a small team, but things weren't clicking. He said to me, I think maybe I was just fooling myself. Maybe I'm not who I thought I was. And I asked him, who told you you were that person to begin with? He paused. My old college professor. She told me I had vision, that I could see things others missed. She told me not to waste that. And then I asked him, has she changed her mind? He laughed a little and said, I don't think so. That was the beginning of him trying again. Not because he suddenly felt confident, but because he reconnected to someone who saw him clearly. You see, belief is not about being told you're amazing. It's about being reminded of your essence, especially when you've forgotten. We all have moments when we lose sight of who we are. Life knocks us down. Failure whispers doubt. Comparison clouds our clarity. In those moments, we don't need more hype. We need honest people who can say, this is who you are. This is why you matter. Don't forget. But those people don't show up by accident. You have to be intentional about who's in your circle. You have to curate your environment as carefully as you curate your goals, because your environment is louder than your willpower. If you're surrounded by people who constantly criticize, compete, or dismiss you, it doesn't matter how strong you think you are. Eventually, you'll shrink to fit their expectations. But if you're surrounded by people who challenge you with love, who call out the gold in you, who are not impressed by your success, but deeply committed to your growth, you'll expand in ways you never imagined. The people who help you believe in yourself don't always say what you want to hear, but they always say what you need to hear. They tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable, because they're more invested in your potential than your performance. And they stick around when things are messy, not just when they're polished. Those are the people worth building your life around. This is not just about friendship or mentorship. It's about alignment. It's about finding people whose values echo yours, whose vision doesn't mirror yours but complements it, whose presence invites you to be more of yourself, not less. When you're in the right room, you don't feel like you need to prove anything. You feel like you're allowed to grow into everything. And sometimes believing in yourself means letting go of people who don't see you. Not because they're bad, not because you're better, but because your path requires a different kind of support. It's painful, but necessary. Because the longer you stay where your identity is questioned, the harder it is to remember what you're capable of. The right relationships don't just support your dreams, they sharpen your identity. This isn't about being dependent, it's about being human. Even the strongest among us need to be reminded. Even the most disciplined need encouragement. Even the leaders need to be led from time to time by someone who sees more in them than they currently see in themselves. I remember someone once telling me, your people are the mirror you'll come to believe. That sentence changed the way I build my circle. It's true. If you're constantly surrounded by people who doubt your ideas, minimize your value, or talk more about who you used to be than who you're becoming, eventually that becomes the reflection you see. But when you're surrounded by people who see your effort, your progress, your integrity, who speak life into your process, you'll begin to believe in a version of yourself that's still becoming. And that's powerful. And here's the secret. The best way to attract those kinds of people is to be that kind of person. Be the one who notices someone else's growth before they do. Be the one who tells your colleague, that idea you had, it's good, don't drop it. Be the one who says, you may not see it now, but you're made for this. Because belief is contagious. The more you give it away, the more you create a space where others feel safe enough to believe in themselves too. And that kind of space is rare. So if you're struggling to believe in yourself right now, don't start by trying to force positivity. Start by checking your circle. Who's in your ear? Who's in your corner? Who's still showing up when you have nothing to prove? And if the answer is no one yet, then that becomes your first mission. Find those people, build that community, or better yet, become that mirror for someone else. Because sometimes the fastest way back to your own belief is by helping someone else find theirs. In the end, self-belief is never fully self-made. It's built in relationship, in connection, in the spaces where we are known, encouraged, challenged, and loved, not for what we do, but for who we are. We often believe that the key to achieving cool things lies in the right opportunity, the perfect moment, the breakthrough idea. We look outward, waiting for signs, timing, or permission. But the real catalyst, the one that quietly determines how far we go, has always been the same. Discipline. Now, discipline isn't glamorous. It's not the word that excites people in a brainstorming session. It doesn't trend, but make no mistake, it's the thread that runs through every meaningful accomplishment. It's the decision to act with consistency even when excitement fades. It's doing the work not just when it's inspiring, but especially when it's inconvenient, boring, or lonely. We have confused inspiration with commitment. We think motivation is the driver, but motivation is a spark. Discipline is what keeps the fire alive. And if you rely only on how you feel, you'll burn out long before you build anything that lasts. Most people think belief in yourself is about hyping yourself up every day. But the truth is, it's not about feeling good. It's about building trust with yourself. And that trust is built through action. Not grand gestures, not massive leaps, but small, repeated choices made daily, quietly, without applause. Let me share a story. A few years ago, I spoke with a young woman who had just finished writing her first novel. She wasn't a full-time writer. She worked in marketing, had 2 kids, and wrote in 20-minute windows every morning before sunrise. When I asked her how she managed to write an entire book in such short increments, she said, "I didn't wait to feel inspired. I just decided not to break the promise." I asked, "What promise?" She smiled, "The one I made to myself." That's what discipline is. It's not punishment. It's not rigidity. It's a promise, a commitment to show up for what matters, even on the days when nothing in you feels like showing up. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you keep that promise, the more belief in yourself grows. Because belief doesn't begin in your mind, it begins in your habits. When you consistently act in alignment with your goals, your brain begins to trust you. You no longer need to convince yourself you're capable. You start to know it because your actions are proving it. You become someone who follows through, someone who says, "This matters to me," and then shows that it matters day after day without drama. That's a powerful thing. Because most people live reactive lives. They move only when pressure forces them. But when you lead with discipline, you're not reacting. You're building. You're crafting a life that reflects your values, not your moods. And here's what most people don't realize. Discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about returning. You will mess up. You will skip a day. You will have weeks where it feels like you've lost your momentum. That's not failure. That's part of the process. What matters is whether you return. Whether you recommit, whether you pick up the pen again, go back to the gym, revisit the hard conversation, and try once more. Discipline is not rigid obedience. It's resilient alignment. We need to stop treating consistency as an achievement and start treating it as a lifestyle. Because that's where the real growth happens. Not in the big, loud moments, but in the repetition of small acts done with purpose. The email you send every day, the 15 minutes of reading, the journaling, the check-in calls, the practice. These things don't feel big in the moment, but over time they compound into something extraordinary. It's no accident that the most effective leaders, creators, and change makers have routines. They protect their mornings, they block time to think, they say no to things that pull them off course. That's not discipline for the sake of structure. It's discipline for the sake of purpose. They've chosen what matters, and they've created systems that help them stay aligned with it. That's what you have to do. If you want to believe in yourself, don't wait until the conditions are perfect. Start small, define the habits that reflect the kind of person you want to become, and then start living like that person now. Not tomorrow, not after you read the next book or get the next opportunity, now. Because the future version of yourself isn't waiting for ideal conditions. They're being shaped by your decisions today. There's a moment when we all hit resistance. It's the point where the excitement fades and the grind begins. That's the test. Not of talent, not of potential, but of commitment. What you do in that moment determines whether you'll keep going or give up. And most of us give up, not because we don't care, but because we haven't built the discipline to carry us through discomfort. But the ones who keep going, they're not superhuman, they're just deeply rooted. They've built systems, they've made promises, they've decided that the work matters more than their temporary feelings. And that decision, not a pep talk, is what carries them. When you show up consistently, you build something much more powerful than results. You build identity. You stop saying, "I want to be a writer," and start saying, "I write." You stop saying, "I'm trying to get healthy," and start saying, "I train." That shift from intention to identity is everything. It changes the way you move through the world. And here's the other gift of discipline. It creates clarity. When you keep showing up, you learn faster. You discover what works and what doesn't. You don't get stuck in analysis, you gain feedback through experience. You stop overthinking and start refining. And with clarity comes confidence. Not hype confidence, but earned confidence. The kind that's built through showing up, failing, learning, and adjusting. So if you want to believe in yourself and achieve cool things, don't start by trying to feel more confident. Start by choosing what matters. Start by making a promise. And then show up. Show up when it's easy, show up when it's hard, show up when no one notices, show up especially then. Because that's when belief is built, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. It's in the early mornings, the quiet choices, the uncelebrated efforts, the quiet recommitments. That's where greatness begins. That's where belief becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a way of life. There's a quiet but powerful shift that happens when you stop measuring your value by comparison and start defining it through contribution. It's the difference between chasing validation and living with intention. Most people are taught to seek self-belief through achievement, through recognition, through applause. But the most sustainable kind of belief, the kind that sticks when the praise fades, comes from knowing that your life serves a purpose bigger than yourself. It's easy to get caught in the trap of chasing cool things, just to prove something to your parents, to your peers, to the version of yourself that still carries doubt. But that kind of striving is hollow. It leads to burnout, to insecurity masked as ambition, to a life that looks successful from the outside but feels empty on the inside. Real belief in yourself doesn't start with ego, it starts with service, with impact. With showing up not to be impressive, but to be useful. Some years ago, I spoke with a firefighter who had been on the job for over 2 decades. I asked him what kept him going after all those years, after the long shifts, the danger, the emotional toll. He didn't talk about bravery or adrenaline. He said, "I know what my presence means to someone else on their worst day. That's enough for me." He wasn't fueled by attention, he was fueled by meaning. There's something profoundly grounding about living for something beyond your own gain. It gives you clarity, it gives you resilience. Because when your work is only about you, then every failure feels personal. Every setback becomes a statement about your worth. But when your work is rooted in service, setbacks become data, not defeat. You adjust not because your value is on the line, but because your mission matters. This is where so many people go wrong. They wait to feel significant before they contribute. They wait to feel ready, smart, established, validated. But contribution doesn't require a title. It requires intention. It's not about being the best in the room. It's about bringing what you have right now to make someone else's world better. Some of the most impactful people I've ever met didn't have the biggest platforms or the most followers. They were mentors, teachers, volunteers, people who saw others and made them feel seen. People who asked thoughtful questions, who remembered names, who gave their full attention. Their power wasn't in their status, it was in their presence. When you live with purpose, you stop obsessing over being the most important person in the room. You start focusing on how to make others feel important, and ironically, that's what gives you real influence. Not control, not attention, but trust. Belief in yourself deepens when you stop trying to be the light and start trying to bring the light. When you show up in a way that makes others feel safer, stronger, more hopeful, that's when you start to believe in your own strength in a way that lasts. Because it's not rooted in how impressive you look. It's rooted in the difference you make. And no, you don't need to save the world. Start small. Contribution begins in conversation, in kindness, in showing up with empathy instead of judgment, in being the one who listens when others are too busy to care. These things may not go viral, but they build character. And character is what sustains belief long after the spotlight moves on. There's this lie we've been sold that says you must find your one big purpose before you can make a meaningful impact. The purpose isn't a grand destination. It's a daily decision. It's how you show up where you are with what you have. It's saying, how can I help, not just how can I win? And the irony is when you live this way, when you make contribution your compass, you actually become the kind of person who achieves cool things. Because you're no longer chasing success as a form of self-worth. You're building success on a foundation of service. And that's the kind of success that lasts, that fulfills, that creates ripple effects far beyond what you can see. I once watched a leader walk into a room of interns, not to give a speech, but to ask questions. He sat at their table, took notes as they spoke, and treated their ideas like they mattered. That moment stayed with me, not because it was flashy, but because it was rare. He didn't need to assert authority. His authority came from his humility. His power came from elevating others. That's what contribution looks like. And here's the thing. The moment you start contributing, you also start healing, not just others, but yourself. Because contribution gives your struggle context. Your failures become lessons worth sharing. Your pain becomes perspective. Your journey becomes useful even if it wasn't perfect, especially if it wasn't perfect. You don't need to wait until you've arrived to help someone else. In fact, sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is share your process, not your success. Let someone see how you're navigating uncertainty. Let them know it's okay to not have it all figured out. That's contribution too. And when you live like this, when your default question becomes, what can I give, instead of what can I get, something powerful happens. You start to see yourself differently. You stop evaluating your worth by your performance and start measuring it by your alignment. You become grounded, clear, resilient, because contribution anchors you. It takes the pressure off needing to be perfect and shifts the focus to being present, to being generous, to being real. So if you want to believe in yourself, truly believe, don't chase the spotlight, chase significance. Don't ask how to stand out. Ask how to stand for something. Because when you live in service to a cause, a value, a community, you'll find a kind of confidence that no applause can give and no failure can take away. You don't need to do everything, just do something that matters. And do it consistently. The person who shows up for others day after day becomes the person who knows their life has meaning. And that's where belief is born, not in ego, but in purpose.